I think what's been interesting is that as I approached 40, I felt really far behind of the cultural markers we have for progress. And at 51, I feel a decade ahead of everyone else. And what I was not prepared for in any way was to be a source of envy. And I understand where that envy comes from.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Just Getting Good, my show where we talk to women over 50 about life, love, divorce, marriage, kids, the lack thereof, movies, sports, hobbies, whatever they want to talk about. Today, I'm actually sitting down with an author whose work I absolutely love. Her most recent memoir, I'm Mostly Here to Enjoy Myself, is probably the book that has been recommended to me basically more than anything else. It is a book about a short period of her life in her 40s when she decided to sort of uproot her life and move to Paris to, as the title suggests, mostly enjoy herself. But it is incredibly candid and refreshing about sex, money, the experience of being a woman at her place in her life, which also in her case happens to be not married, no children, and total freedom. So I was extremely grateful to get the chance to sit down with my guest Glennice today so she can tell you all about all of those things and more. Something that we talk about a lot on this channel is the importance of taking your finances seriously, especially when you are younger and have more time to plan for them. Almost every woman that I've spoken to on this show so far has either said their best advice is to start taking your finances seriously younger, or their regret is that they wish they had made different choices when they were younger, because when you have that time for interest to accumulate, for little savings to stack up into bigger ones, and time to plan, and your health and viability to be able to work, it is insanely important to take your finances seriously. I have personally been working with a financial advisor for a few years now, and I can honestly say it has totally changed my financial life for the better. It has enabled me to feel so much more confident and secure in so many of my decisions. It also helps me decipher the news, understand what I'm reading, and make better decisions based on information that not only I don't always fully understand myself, but also don't necessarily have the time to become an expert on. A financial advisor isn't necessarily for everyone. It's not necessarily something you may be financially ready for at this stage, but if you are in the place where you're thinking of making big financial moves, I highly recommend you set up a totally free phone call with Advisor to talk to one of their advisors and see what it could potentially look like. We absolutely love the team at advisor.com. We've been working with them for a long time. They are also operating on a flat fee model, which means it's totally transparent. Everyone pays the same regardless of how much they have. And it means they work for you and not for commissions. Check them out at the link in our description. Set up a free call. It costs you nothing to see. Glennice, hello.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I am so thrilled to have you because I've been a fan of your writing for a very long time. And I've been, when I started this show, I was like, I have to see if I can get Glennice on. And luckily we know enough people that I was like, I literally queued up everyone I know who knew you to be like, ask Glennice if she'll be on the show.
That's so nice. I love hearing that.
So let's start off, because obviously I'm very familiar with you, but for anyone watching who isn't, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
That question gets more and more complicated the longer you try to make a living as a writer.
Sure.
I am first and foremost a writer. I've written 2 memoirs. No One Tells You This, and then most recently, I'm Mostly Here to Enjoy Myself. A journalist. I was a media reporter and then a politics reporter. Then I moved more into culture writing. I work as an editor sometimes. I did a very in-depth podcast about Little House on the Prairie and Laura Ingalls Wilder a number of years ago.
Okay.
And I run a writing workshop in Paris. So, yeah. There's no short answer anymore to those questions, I feel like.
And so the show is called Just Getting Good because I like to start by asking women at what age they felt like things really started getting good for them.
Oh, I mean, in hindsight now, I have such fond memories of all of my ages because I think that the older I get, the more, I don't know, grace or forgiveness I have towards myself, or I can enjoy certain time periods of my life from a distance. You know, in my 20s, I think I felt as confused and all over the place as anyone else. But in hindsight, I just think I felt like I was behind, and I was a waitress, and I was like, what am I doing with my life? And in hindsight, I think, oh, thank God that I had those years, which were in the 90s and in New York and so much fun. And of course, we had no idea at that time that this was sort of the last moment before everything went online. So I can enjoy them from a distance. And the same with my 30s, which is when my career really went into overdrive. I think I started feeling much more secure in myself right around 40. In my 40s, I turned, how old am I now? I'm 51. So I think my 40s were both far more enjoyable than I ever could have imagined based on how you're prepared to experience your 40s, and then difficult in ways that I was not sort of warned about. Both my parents died when I was in my 40s, my mother after quite a long illness, and of course we had COVID, and then at the same time I had a lot of success as a writer, and I don't know, I have good and bad things to say about all of them, but yeah, I suppose around 40 I started to feel a lot more secure in myself.
Now, most people don't have one memoir in them, let alone two,
right.
And counting. I mean, we don't know. You could have another one.
I'm sure I do at some point.
What made you feel like you wanted to write about your life in that way?
I think, to begin, I think that we understand, I would separate memoir from autobiography, and I think traditionally we think of autobiography as at the end of your life, you look back and you've had these great accomplishments. I think what memoir has become is what sort of romaniclef novels traditionally were up until recently, which is you'd have writers writing a sort of very mildly fictionalized version of their experience, Nora Ephron in Heartburn, or even The Sun Also Rises with Hemingway. You're talking about writers who are just writing about themselves. For my first memoir, I felt No One Tells You This, which was about turning 40 and not being partnered and not having kids. And I did think about fictionalizing it, but I felt like the thing I was struggling with most at that time was that there were no narratives for what my life looked like or could look like. And that was so punishing, to sort of look out at the cultural landscape and suddenly become invisible on it. And I felt really strongly that when I wrote about it, I wanted the reader to understand it was real life. Like, I didn't want it to be fictionalized. I wanted it to be like, I was very attracted to memoir and real life figures. I mean, my obsession with the Little House books runs quite deep, hence the podcast. But, and so I really, and enough things had happened that year that I sort of understood it as a narrative arc. But that was really, I felt so strongly that I wanted people to know this was not imagined. And then the same with I'm Mostly Here to Enjoy Myself. I came back I was alone in New York during the COVID lockdown, which is, everybody who is here knows, was rather severe. And after a year and a half of a lot of very solitary existence, I had spent part of my summer in Paris prior to COVID. It's actually where I finished writing No One Tells You This. And the place I had lived in opened up, and I thought, I'm just going to buy a plane ticket. It seems like things are opening up. I'm going to go. And I had this amazing sort of 6 weeks, and I got back, and again, I thought about fictionalizing it as a novel. And again, I thought now we've suddenly had sort of an influx, but we don't have a lot of narratives or depictions of women enjoying themselves outside of marriage, outside of parenting, or outside of partnership and outside of parenting, or being sort of sexually viable and all in the way that we talk about friendships. And so I felt really strongly that I wanted the reader to know this was real life, my version of real life.
It's funny. I think I'm Only Here to Enjoy Myself is probably, or I'm Mostly Here to Enjoy Myself is probably the book that has been recommended to me the most over the years in terms of and I'm going to put a sign on my Instagram that's like, I've read it, guys.
I love hearing that. Thank you.
Because, I talk quite a lot about the choice to not have children. Mm-hmm. And although I am married, I've been with my husband for 15 years. I think by a lot of people's standards, I live a very separate life from him. Like, we don't have joint finances. We sleep separately most of the time. I travel quite a lot without him, and vice versa. And I think, even still in many ways kind of adhering to our models of what life looks like for women, in the sense that I am married, even those diversions, the choice not to have children, the choice to still live quite independently, I think is at least I feel an estrangement from not the women in my own life. Obviously, we kind of self-select for people who we feel like we share a lot with, but there are many times when I feel like you're saying, like there's just very little of you reflected. And I'm curious now, being at 51, I imagine that statistically most of the women in your life have either gotten married or had kids or some combination of that, and now that the children are older. When women are reaching an age like yours, often they are coming out of sort of this fog of young children, of everything being about other people, and rediscovering themselves. And a lot of the women we're talking to in this show are going through that exact journey. How does it feel to kind of be in the position you're in with so many, at the age when many women are just starting to rediscover themselves?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if this is being in New York, but a lot of my friends actually still do have small children.
Oh, that's true.
They're still in the thick of it. I do have some friends who have, it's the eldest kid in my life right now, just turned 16, is my nephew. But my youngest nephew is 10. So still, my sister's still in the thick of it. I think what's been interesting is that as I approached 40, I felt really far behind of the cultural markers we have for progress. And at 51, I feel a decade ahead of everyone else. And that what I was not prepared for in any way was to be a source of envy. And I understand where that envy comes from, because I have many friends who are, for all the reasons that we discuss, overwhelmed with child rearing and especially during COVID, juggling all the things that come along with that at the same time. And so there's this sense of like, I can feel sort of hungry eyes on me. But I also have a deep bench of friends who are neither married nor partnered or have children. So I've been able to build a sort of a vast network of relationships that reflect all these different decisions. And that's a comfort too, because when you want to have a conversation about what it looks like to be living outside of partnership or outside of parenthood, I don't have to explain myself to a certain group of friends. And then at the same time, I feel so grateful to be in the lives of my friends who are partnered, and particularly with children. I was about to say particularly when they're partnered with people who have like skill sets like fixing things, working and cooking. That's a real benefit.
Listen,
that's a bonus for me.
It comes in handy.
Yeah. But particularly with children, because I really do enjoy children immensely. So I think it was so difficult in my 30s when so many of my friends, and I think this is a more modern phenomenon, is that we build our lives around, particularly women, we build our lives around friendship for a lot of our 20s and into our 30s. And with that comes financial structure, if you're sharing homes and traveling. And when there was a period of time where a number of my closest friends got married, then my life was upended through sort of no choice of my own. You felt very out of control and very lonely. And on the other side of it now, I'm finding a lot of my female friends who are really in the thick of it do feel very isolated and do feel very alone. And that even though it feels like we have an abundance of narratives around motherhood and marriage, they are narrow in a way that can be just as isolating for them as it was for me to have no narrative. So I always say to young women who are experiencing that sort of sense of abandonment that it can be small comfort in the moment, but most of your friends come back to you 10 years later and they're like, I'm starved for friendship and how do I spend more time with you?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's real. I think it's always interesting. Your writing comes across as someone who has little to no regret, or, you know, no one's lives are like unquestioned, right? But they seem very sort of embodied and, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Like there's an enviable sense of just sort of intentionality and without that kind of second guessing. And there are things that I feel that way about, like not having children, but there are other aspects of life that I feel very like, I really don't know if I'm making the right decision in the moment or, what have you. And I'm wondering, as someone who does seem so at peace with the path their life has taken and with the things that they prioritize, is that actually how you feel? Or is that sort of, do you feel a responsibility to portray yourself in an extremely sort of contented way because there's so few women doing that by themselves?
All of my life regrets are real estate based. To be clear, we can turn this whole podcast into a real estate podcast. I feel like it's my number one conversation. I would never describe myself, or not even necessarily my writing, as content, because I feel like I'm always very eager to interrogate, the difficulties that I encounter. But I also, and because I find it, I think less so now than when I started writing about this, but there's a sense, because so many of the narratives around women's lives are about how your only way to sort of satisfaction is through partnership and is through parenthood, that I for a while there, I felt like I couldn't complain about anything without the response immediately being like, oh, we've all known that you've made some bad decisions, as opposed to offering the grace of everybody second guesses or everybody has struggles with all of their life choices. But I really, really worked hard to not have my writing be sort of raw, because I didn't want, I'm not attracted to those books. I'm not attracted to sort of like the 40 and Fabulous or the 50 and Fabulous, whatever it is. At the same time, I wanted to be very clear about the enjoyable, incredibly empowering, I guess, elements of the way I live, and try and be very transparent. I actually think about my life choices the same way I think about being a freelance writer, which is maybe not relatable, but maybe it is relatable for people who are freelancing. I always walk up to the edge of thinking, oh, a full-time job with a paycheck and benefits seems really nice. And then I'm like, but I'm not willing to give up the agency and freedom and determination that my current life offers me. And I feel like I can recognize, certainly the older you get and the more marriages that you're exposed to, because as a person who's not partnered, I'm often in other people's homes, in other people's marriages to a degree. With a bird's eye view, I think that maybe is sort of a newer experience culturally. And so you begin to recognize that some people are built for marriage and partnership and some people aren't. And we just live in a world where culturally, socially, and financially, it is to your benefit to be in partnership, but whether or not you're built for it. And I think probably what you're sensing in this confidence in my choices is I'm fully aware that my life is aligned to the person that I am built for the life that I am leading in a way that is undeniable to me, that doesn't remove the struggles or, the times where it's very difficult. I sort of feel the same way about it, like living in New York. Like I'm so clearly have the life that I'm supposed to have, so aligned with who I am as a person. And also in sort of the grand scheme of things, my mother was a historian, and she would ask her any question, and she would be like, you'd ask her like a word, and she'd be like, well, the Latin for this phrase, and it dates back to, 14th century England. The perspective I have on my life is, and it's increasing certainly with what's happening in the world and particularly in this country, how fortunate I am to be able to align my life with the person I am, and understanding that historically how many women would have the degree to which they would have sacrificed to have even a shot at the amount of agency I have, and that they didn't have that opportunity, feels to me like an obligation to live this as fully as I can, because I am able to align my life to who I am. And that's so rare on the scope of history. It's so rare in the worlds that we're currently occupying. And that's always front of mind with me. That doesn't mean that I don't, when my health insurance premiums come in or whatever the other thing is, that I'm not, complaining or think that things are unfair. Or I think, wow, if I was, particularly as a freelance writer in New York, and I look around and I think I'm one of the few who are existing in this life barely, without someone else, without a 2-income household, or without someone else providing the health insurance, or whatever those aspects are. But of course, you only see in other people's lives what's missing in yours. You never see the full picture of what other people are doing. You just see the part of it that would fix your life.
That's true. And I think, we talk a lot on the channel about the reality of heterosexual marriages financially, logistically, in terms of division of labor, in terms of all these things. And the reality is many, many women are in marriages where they're effectively single parents.
Oh, completely. I'm full. Yes. And I often, when people say, I am the emergency phone call for many of my friends, many of whom are married to very nice people.
Pathetic.
It's just, it's again, when people say to you, you're going to die alone, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, my married friends are planning their retirement around living with me. Like the narratives we have around these choices are so often removed from the reality of what is happening on the grounds. And I think these structures are set up in a way that you can only flourish within partnership. And of course, we know who benefits from heterosexual marriage. So like none of these things are, unintentional or an accident.
When you see the stats around men who abandon their wives when they get ill or disabled, and I say, if you're diagnosed with something terminal and your husband leaves you or doesn't take care of you, you should get to kill him as well. Like, what do you have to lose?
That's a whole other type of Hunger Games.
No, but truly, but it's so common.
Yes.
And you think about, I don't know, I feel a real anxiety about how much we are, because, with all the trad wife stuff that's, becoming more appealing. And I do understand there is a logic to it in the sense of like now women, they used to be in these awful marriages, didn't have any choice, often couldn't even access contraception, having all these kids they didn't want. They were not in a good place, but at least in theory, they didn't have to work a full-time job. And now you have a situation where so many women, on top of still having to do the majority of the domestic labor, raise the kids, clean the house, cook the food, they're also having to clock in for a shift just as long as their husbands. So
we made it impossible for women to flourish in the workplace.
Yeah.
And which is, again, I think not an accident. And it's the sort of fantasy of the housewife, which again, only existed for a very small slice of the population during a very small slice of time. I think that we are being punished for the fact that mass media arrived at a time of, conservative, socially speaking, constriction in the United States post-war, so that we have this idea of what a norm is that actually only existed for less than a decade and only existed for a sort of white middle-class American population, and that if you actually looked at what marriage has looked like traditionally for people who didn't have real wealth, women were working full-time they were just as exhausted, and they had absolutely no choice. So this fantasy is a fantasy. Listen, when I did, not to bring everything back to Little House on the Prairie, although I can.
I'm sad.
When we did the Wilder podcast, we drove around to all of the Laura Ingalls houses and looking at the dugout. In one of the books, they lived in a dugout. And we were really thinking about, like, in the book, Laura makes it seem so magical to live in a dugout by a creek, but Ma had to be in this literal hole in the ground with 4 children and her husband and cook and clean and get her period and have sex and have a baby. And you're just like, this is terrible. This is terrible. The whole thing is terrible. I think one of the ways we are punished by so much of history only being told through male experience is not really understanding how difficult life has been for women for most of history, and really understanding the granular reality of that. But it was a survey of American women from sort of the Mayflower landing to the 1960s. And she was writing about how we don't know how women who came here dealt with their periods because women couldn't write and were too ashamed to write, and the ones who could were too ashamed to write the details down. And you just think about even that, it's not a small thing. That's something half the population experiences every month, and we don't know how they dealt with it. And that's so much of history. Like that is just a metaphor for how we don't understand history. And it allows, that vacuum allows us to put in this like fantasy of the trad wife, which of course, if you talk to women in the 50s who were sort of constricted to their homes, we know what that reality looked like because they all burst out of it. So I it's so, again, I think so much of it comes back to our absence of narratives outside of very narrow, specific one.
Yeah.
And women are exhausted right now. They are. I mean, I get why the fantasy looks appealing.
Same. Kind of on that note, something I struggle with a lot, and I know is like not rational totally, but it's hard to shake off, is a feeling of really feeling like I need a certain level of professional success because I don't feel that I have these other things that are socially validated. And especially, you know, I would love to pretend I'm the kind of person who doesn't care that like my in-laws are perpetually disappointed that I'm not having a child or like things like that.
Right.
But I do. It hurts me. And I do also feel socially, professionally, this need of like, not that I have like need a good reason to not have kids, but I would be lying if I said there wasn't an additional pressure on me to find other things to feel really proud of and identified by. Do you deal with that? And if so, how?
I did deal with that. Being 51, that conversation goes away because I'm like past the point of expectation of being able to have children. So there's no sort of like, are you still thinking about it? Aren't you worried you're going to regret it? Again, speaking of narratives, when I wrote No One Tells You This about, and you know what, even that book was not about me deciding not to have children. I was very specific in the book of saying I recognized I'd be okay without children, that I wasn't willing to do the extra steps, particularly to be a single mother, to have a child, and I recognized I'd be fine. And I heard from all these women who, because of course there are women who are like, you're going to regret it and you're going to run to the fertility bank in 6 or 7 years. And then of course I heard from all these women, you know, 50s and beyond, who are like, you're never going to regret it. You'll regret it less as every day passes. And I thought, we never hear those narratives in the culture. To answer your question, I felt it right around 39 or 40 where people are like, don't worry, there's still time. But not being partnered changes that conversation because people are telling you, don't worry, you're going to find someone to get married to. It's less about the kid conversation than it is about, oh, you're going to die alone. And then through my 40s, my mother was quite ill for a long time with Parkinson's and dementia. And then my father died a few years later. And so that sort of having to come home to the Thanksgiving table and having people make you feel bad was not my experience with my family. My family was...
They had other fish to fry.
And also I was the support system for so much of that time that it was a lot of, you know, it shifted the power dynamic, I guess I would say, and also writing about it, right? When you give a language to it, I think it changes people's conversation with you because you end up starting to hear from a lot of people who are like, I see myself in this. And I would hear from women who'd been married for 30 years and they would come up to me and just quietly say, I wish that I had made your decision. You made the right decision. And so my experience of putting that out in the world was very much hearing the conversations that we don't hear more publicly. And that changes how I experienced it. But I really do think when you are married and don't have kids, you're dealing with a whole other set of expectations that I didn't encounter.
You know what's interesting? There's studies that show that women who have one child face just as much judgment as women who have none. Because then you're like, oh, you're not going to give them a sibling. You're not. Oh,
I'm sure I have a number of friends who are dealing with that.
God.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no. This is what I mean. Even when you can say, I can say, I don't see any version of myself out in the world. And I think the further you progress down, sort of the checking off the boxes that you're expected to check off, what you realize is the narratives that are out there are so narrow that you don't see yourself in them. But because they're so prevalent, you get to be punished by them. So I don't know that. I think women, no matter what choices we're making, are not, you are punished to some degree by the absence of cultural narratives around them. I almost think at this point, the invisibility is freeing for me because it's like, I've now moved off. This is changing a little bit, but when you're 51, this has changed, I think, just recently with All Fours, with my book, with Baby Girl. This idea of being sexually viable at this age and not being in a position to have children, I think that's very, very frightening to a lot of patriarchal structures. And I think it's not disconnected from a lot of the rollback that we're seeing right now. But you have sort of, no one's quite sure what to do with you. And also, if you appear to be enjoying your life, there is a sense of envy from other women your age who are still in the thick of it. So it's like a weird place to be where I don't feel judged at all. I feel very powerful, actually. I feel almost exclusively powerful, except when it comes to real estate.
Well, I want to talk about the sex stuff, but we need to get into this real estate because you brought it up twice.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable talking about money?
All I do is talk about money.
Oh, thank God. Okay. So
I walk into parties at this point, and when I see people, I'm like, how are you making money right now? Especially writers. I'm always like, we all having this conversation because it's such a tough go right now that I literally will have the same way I talk about menopause and perimenopause with literally anyone. I will just be like, how are you making money? Where is it coming from? Oh, family? Okay, great. Now I know that I'm not missing something.
Let's get into it. So what are these real estate regrets you keep alluding to?
I don't own an apartment. I don't own my apartment, which I love. And I really wish, I don't know how, I think it would have made a difference. When I was in my early 20s, there was I remember my best friend from high school bought her apartment, her first apartment. And
in
there
New York
was,
City?
No, in Toronto. I grew up in outside of Toronto. And there was some sense around her coming from family that she was making herself less viable for marriage by owning her own home.
Women still hear that.
Yes. And also the early Sex and the City, when Miranda, and Sex and the City is, not enough the reason we're still talking about it is not enough has changed. And also people are like, oh, we already have this one thing, so we don't need more exploration around these experiences. There was an early episode where Miranda goes to buy her apartment and the real estate agent is like, oh, you and your husband? Oh, you have a boyfriend? Like this whole, like, who else is going to be in this space with you? And in hindsight, I wish that I had understood or been made to understand that my financial focus, that A, I should have had a financial focus, and B, that financial focus should have been on real estate, number one. Because owning an apartment in New York is very expensive. And it's very out of reach if you are a single income without family support. And it doesn't mean it's impossible. It just gets, it's, in this environment, it's nearly impossible. And so I think that there's a reason a room of one's own is sort of the perennial favorite, is because there comes with your own space a degree of security and agency and power and stability that is hard to replicate in any other way. And as a person who rents, financially that might be a better decision in New York, but there's an instability to that really weighs on me. And it's not solvable in New York right now. Part of this is New York based, right? I think I could solve this if I left New York, and I am in a long-term, sometimes abusive relationship with this city. But I do think this is a conversation I have with women a lot who aren't partnered, is that we are in long-term relationships with the city of our choice. Like, this is my long-term relationship, for better or worse.
Sex and the City reference.
Yeah, totally. And there's a reason, Rebecca Traister wrote about this in All the Single Ladies. There's a reason so many stories about single women take place in New York, because the city fills the role that in many other places a spouse fills. Like,
as does a super.
Completely. Absolutely. But you can get, within 500 feet of my apartment it would just be just as expensive for me to grocery shop as it is to go down, have the food, get it delivered, the dry cleaners, the nail salon, the whole shebang is at my doorstep. And then also you have a social life delivered to you on the sidewalk that's so easily accessible. And I still get this question, but I would get it a lot with No One Tells You This, of like, how do you have friends or how do you see people? And I would say, I recognize your struggle, because when you live in the suburbs and you have to drive to a place, it requires you to make intentional dates, which is a much different way of living. Whereas when you're in a major city, particularly a walking city, your interactions are so much easier, and you can get a human connection fix, whether or not it's the fix you want necessarily, by like walking downstairs to the coffee shop and like, hi, how are you? You know, your regular places. And I think that solves a lot of isolation problems. But to get back to real estate, so I think it's the sense of like, I have the life I want in every regard, but it's so vulnerable to being upended because I don't have the security of home ownership.
Where do you live in the city?
Upper West Side. I've never lived
below 14th?
No, I lived the Lower East Side when I first came to New York, which was the late 90s, and I paid $350 in rent.
Should have bought there, man. Wow.
I mean, this is the thing in hindsight, and I'm always like, oh, you should have bought. And I'm like, also, I was a waitress. But, you know, you made a lot of money as a waitress. So I actually think it was a possibility had... And I hear when other people who are homeowners and I hear how their family, it's usually family money for a down payment is the truth, right? There's, in the conversations I have with people, I'm almost always there's one or two people I know this isn't true. Almost always someone's family has provided them with a down payment.
Continue.
Right.
My family's poor. Sorry.
No, I think that's useful to know though, because I think one of the things that Instagram revealed was the wealth. You'd look at people who you're like, how do they get away with just writing one piece a week? Or how do they get it? And you're like, oh, they're married to money, or there's family money. Someone has provided them with a down payment. I think when you cross-relate, I don't know if the triangulate, street easy purchase listings, which you can get with the New York Times wedding section, it's really easy to figure out how certain people have afforded certain apartments. Like, it's the mystery. And so that's a relief in the sense of it's not my failure. Some of it's my failure, but it's not necessarily my failure so much as a system that I almost never have access to, right? Like, if a down payment in New York is $200,000, this is very New York based, but like, where does that chunk of money come from? So all of these questions, and I think that those questions are not solvable at age 50 without an enormous career windfall. They incrementally would have been solvable had I devoted my attention to it starting at age 23. And I didn't. And it didn't even occur to me to do that. So that is where, when I say all of my regrets, I have no one that got away regrets. There's a divorce I didn't have to go through acknowledgments when I look back on the certain relationships, but I really have deep regret of not prioritizing my finances with an eye to real estate. And that's the number one piece of financial advice I give to young people, particularly young women, is don't be scared of money. Don't be scared of numbers. Get a financial advisor very early on, even if you've made terrible decisions, even if you don't see why it might be useful. Get very comfortable with what's in your bank account. Remove all shame. There's no profit in shame, unless you write about it and make money off of it. But like, just start thinking early on about that, and not necessarily as like a retirement savings thing, but as an equity, as a stability, as real estate. I mean, real estate is so empowering and powerful.
I gotta say this. The Instagram thing is so funny to me as far as like, how is this all happening? Mm-hmm. Being in media, especially, I've been in media my whole career. I know what it pays. I know what it doesn't pay.
Yes.
And let me tell you, this is like very relevant to this conversation, because in the last month alone, I've had multiple jump scares of knowing someone through like Instagram, through like a podcast, they write a book every now and then. My last book deal was $120,000. That's a good amount-ish, but A, you have to pay the photographer, illustrator, all that stuff. B, it comes in 4 installments over 2.5 years. That's like substitute teacher money at best.
When Andrew Cuomo went after Mom Donnie for making $143,000 a year and living in a rent-stabilized 2-bedroom for what was 32, whatever it was in Queens, and I was like, he has just owned himself in his absolute ignorance of how little money that is, and how that rent stabilized. I mean, the whole thing was so ludicrous, because I spent so much time in Paris, where their salaries are significantly lower than Americans, but their socialized healthcare system is so comprehensive. And I say to people, for the security a friend of mine had to fix her bathroom for 3,000 euros. And she was so like, I can't believe I only have 10,000 euros in savings. And I'm like, your 10,000 euro for all of security you get and your home ownership, I would have to have $5 million in the bank to even come close to it. And it's just, when we talk about those numbers, $120,000 does sound like a lot of money. And it is. And it is to some degree. But when you understand the payment structure of that and the reality of that, you're like, this is minimum wage.
Precisely. And so, like, when I'm, and like, listen, you can Google how much my house cost. It was $752,000. I got a 2% interest rate. So I pay $21.95 a month for my mortgage, and I pay that. And like, don't get me wrong, like, that is upper middle class for sure. My husband also makes money. I have dual incomes. I have multiple incomes in my own life. Like, I am not crying poverty by any means. But I know what it does and doesn't pay. The past 2 months alone, I have been invited over. I walk into this house, it's an $8 million and I'm like, excuse? Like, and
is it always with people who want to split the check? Because sometimes I'm like, I'm no,
I will say that they're generous people. And listen, I'm such, like, I feel very, I am so desensitized by talking about money, because it's always been a part of my life. My entire sort of like publicly visible career has always intersected with talking in very raw numbers about every aspect of my life. So I do sometimes underestimate the degree to which, like, the people I know who are living in, I mean, truly 1%, even sometimes 1% of the 1%, they make efforts to not make that known, or not make that kind of a part of their sort of public presence. And I think that I was literally just the other day saying to a woman who was talking about that kind of tension, and I say, honestly, I think by hiding it, you're making it worse on yourself. But I also think that there's this sort of invisible arms race of, because there is such an illegitimacy to, like, the chick who's doing one article every other month for Elle or Travel and Leisure, whatever. On a good day, you're getting paid $1,000 for that. Like, if you're
lucky these days.
If you're lucky. Yeah. And yet we know that there's absolutely no sort of, that doesn't match up with your life whatsoever, but you are able to present a life that is not only so financially, comfortable, but also so artistically uncompromised.
Yes.
That it puts this insane pressure on the people who actually have to pay their bills with this money to also maintain a sense of artistic prestige, integrity, ethics, whatever. But they actually have to live off of it. And me watching your social media as a follower up to this point, I spend half the year in France. I know what that shit costs. So in my mind, I've always thought that you are a very, very wealthy person, because you always seem to be taking on these cool projects.
In the book, there's a chapter in the book where I for that exact reason, I dissect all the finances, because it's actually less expensive to go there. But no, it's a lot of, I think I have a wealth of relationships. Like, I tap into the bank account of relationships, which we don't ever talk about in terms of how valuable that is, and how that, in my mind, the goodwill is maybe not more useful than money, but has enormous value in it. I try to be transparent, because it's funny, when I flew back from Paris this last time, I'd been bumped up to business, and I took a photo, and I thought, oh God, I shouldn't have, but I was like, oh, this is projecting a reality that is not my reality whatsoever, as I'm like, how's the rent getting paid in 2 months? Which is always a question. Like, when people were like, during COVID, oh, it's really screwed with my 5-year plan. I'm like, a 5-year plan? I'm like, I have a 5-month plan if I'm lucky, which I do write about and enjoy. Yeah, I think it has, again, we project our own ideas on things, but yeah, I think Instagram opened an interesting door, and has also it's proved very complicated, because you can make assumptions about other people's financial situation in a way that is very disconnected from reality. I don't know why I don't have financial envy so much. I think a friend of mine, my best friend from high school, who's very, very, very successful. I was sitting at the dinner table one night, and she said, she's planning out her retirement, and I said, I have no retirement savings. I don't even, I was so far away from this conversation. And she's looked at me and she goes, you've been living your life as if you've been making the decisions your entire life that people wait to retirement to make. And that was very true, that I do prioritize within reality, aligning my life as much as possible to what I want to be doing and to like the best version of where my talents lie. And I've never made the decisions of working for a corporation where I would own an apartment or doing all of those things. And I'm paying the financial price for that, but I'm not paying the price. I never look at my life and think, I'm envious of your finances, because I'm like, I enjoy my life to such a degree. But I also think some of this, and just thinking back to the first question about when did you feel fully yourself and sort of having grace for certain things. My parents, growing up in Canada, this might have shifted somewhat, but there is not the class divide, certainly when I grew up, that exists in the States. I remember when I first started working in media, I said to a friend of mine, I said, don't you think it's so strange that all these people, like, they all seem to know each other from Yale and Harvard? Like, it had not even crossed my mind that I didn't encounter that growing up. There was not that sense. And where we grew up, everybody was sort of, some people had more money, but everybody was like, it was the divides did not exist, and maybe the envy was not, didn't engender envy in the same way that I do see in the States, 100%, because great wealth is not really a possibility in Canada, but great poverty, there's definitely poor people, but like the social safe rails sort of keep those extremes at a minimum. And then in addition to that, both my parents were highly, highly educated. They both had 2 master's degrees, both on scholarships. And they were a mess. They
dragged them.
I mean, no, they were a disaster. There was so much emotional, mental health issues and addiction. And they filed for bankruptcy when I was in high school, and I was paying their taxes one year. Like, I did not ever align education or the ability to be career-wise successful traditionally with life success. And that was not a great, stable way to grow up, but it was definitely shifted my priorities. I was like, clearly these decisions do not result in a happy life. So I do not feel that like education solves things, which is not, the best way to approach education. And I do not think like being able to get these jobs is a solution to anything. And it really shifted my priorities. I was just very like, I want to have a big life and I want to have an adventurous life. And that was such a priority that I have adhered to and paid a very literal price for. But it doesn't leave me envious. It leaves me wanting an apartment.
Do you feel anxiety about not having anything saved for retirement?
No. I mean, sort of. I should have some anxiety.
Yeah.
No, I do. I don't like, I'm not an anxious person. I'm just not, I'm a many different things, but anxiety is not a thing that I struggle with enormously. I recognize that it's not good that I don't have retirement savings. But I don't, when I go around asking other single women in my life who are in writing or the arts, none of them have retirement. Like, they're like, are even not even just single women. The amount of people I know who have no retirement savings, and they're like, no, are you kidding? How could you put that together? And also sometimes I look at the state of the country right now and I'm like, this might turn out to be my best decision because things don't look like they're going in such a great direction now where any of us are going to be able to retire. So I'm never going to look back and be like, wow, you've wasted your life. I don't ever have that feeling. I should think more about, again, probably my real estate obsession is somewhat to do with retirement, but America's such a casino, and New York, I think, is like the back room at the casino that you're rewarded for risk taking, and maybe not. I might be kidding myself. It's definitely, I don't feel anxiety, but I definitely think about money a lot.
It goes against my nature to not express concern for no retirement savings, but
I know. Well, I don't even. But here's
it.
the thing: I'm a very successful writer. And even then, that only allows me to barely keep my head above water.
What do you make? Can you share what you make in a year?
It changes every year. I want to say I make between 100 and 120, depending on the years. The way it comes in, I always want to be like, I'm going to save this book advance. But then you end up living on it. Or you end up like my health insurance is $1,200 a month for one mammogram and a doctor's appointment. You know, like there's no...
What's your rent?
$3,100, which is not bad for New York.
One bedroom?
Studio. And that's not bad for a studio in New York right now.
I know, but God, these prices are so eye-watering.
I pay less than most people I know.
Yeah.
And I've got a great location. So there's my overhead every month between bills, like rent, health insurance, going out to dinner once, maybe twice a week, which I think is a necessity, and groceries and bills is like close to $6,000 a month that I have to bring in on my own. Which
because your 1 to 120 is pre-tax.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yes. And the way the money comes in, so like there's no. I do better than. That's what I mean when I say as a person living alone in New York that I'm surviving like this is incredible. But it doesn't. There's no buffer there to save anything.
Yeah, it's such an expensive city, but there's a lot of benefits that come with it, and you probably wouldn't have the career you did if you didn't live here.
Yeah. At all. I'm just like, also I'd be such a boring person, but
not Toronto getting savaged.
Oh yeah, I'm not the spokesperson. I've been in New York for 30 years. I am not the spokesperson for Canada. I recognize the trade-off I'm making. I also think, though, that like in a country where there is no socialized medicine, and in a country, in a life where you are your sole financial support system there's just the idea of financial security is so, it's a fantasy. Like it's such I would need so much money for financial security. It's so out of reach. Like it's not like me saving slightly or taking on a slightly different job would solve this problem, which is probably why I don't worry about it so much, because the solution, it's not like the solution is sitting right here and I'm running alongside it and I just have to rein it in slightly. The solution is like on another planet. There's no, I don't know the different decisions I would have had to have made to achieve that are so extreme that I wouldn't have wanted the life that had offered me, you know? Like I don't know how to get that. I don't know anyone who has it without family support.
So to head off the chatter in the comments, because you know our commenters. So I think that there's nuance to that. Like my mom's a public school teacher, right? And like she has a good, like my parents don't have much, but they have my mom's retirement,
of course,
and have had her health insurance. And like I do think, like I would say a good amount of my friends, even in the city, work what you would probably consider a normal job, and they make it work. And like, you know, I was just at dinner with one of my oldest friends and her husband. They live in Astoria.
And her husband?
He's a baker.
Yes.
He probably makes less than a teacher. And this is not to say, by the way, that
No.
it
I just
happen.
think that it's very important to focus on the difference between a 2-income household. And if I lived in a 1-bedroom with a partner, I would be paying half of what I pay right now, and one person would be providing health insurance. Like there is a punishment financial to being your sole financial supporter that doubles all of your costs.
That is true, and I will not. And obviously, I'm not going to be like, oh, and then the single, obviously, there's a lot of truth to that.
Unless I got into finance, like there are different decisions I could have made in my life where I got a law degree or I went to work on Wall Street, and that would have resulted financially in a much different reality for me. But that would have required me to be a different person with different talents.
For sure. I do just want to because we both work in media, and I don't want to discount the fact that there are many, many professions out there that aren't necessarily being an iBanker that you can build some security.
Right. I'd be happy to talk to them as a single person, hearing how they built that security.
Yeah.
And part of that in New York is if you got a rent controlled apartment, that's a real people I know who, far more than owning, people I know who've managed to land the newspaper job that has a salary that allows you, and in a job that has not disappeared every 3 years, leaving you to find the new job, have a rent stabilized apartment, and that makes all of the difference. So absolutely, these are specific to my life choices, but my life choices, the impossibility of doing what I'm good at and achieving this, the divide is so enormous. And even then, I'm thinking like school teacher. I have many friends who are public school teachers. It's a 2-income household, and they are barely keeping their heads above water. So and those benefits, those pensions, and those health care are not what they used to be. And I think that's a reality this country is going to be dealing with very, very soon, especially with healthcare premiums doubling or quadrupling in the next month. I might be talking about an extreme version of this, but I have friends in 2-income households with 2 kids who have no retirement savings, and they both work full time. This is not.
Oh, the last thing we would ever claim on this channel is that most people have retirement, or that most people have financial security, or that it's easy, or that it's universal. I think what I always try to push against in our work is a sense of fatalism about the ability of small decisions to have an impact. And I do think a lot of our audience are single women, and many of them are homeowners. Many of them are, they do, I think that, and I struggle with this all the time, right? Because a lot of our content is political, and we're always sort of agitating for we should not have to pay for these things. We should not be out of pocket for these things. We are the richest country in the world. We could be living at such a higher standard of living, and
I could be a homeowner if I didn't live in New York.
For sure.
100%.
But I think for me, there's always that fine line between acknowledging the difficulty and acknowledging what should be changed, and also trying to find pockets of agency within that financially, because I have a lot of family that has historically abdicated any financial responsibility. And, you were paying your parents' taxes, that weighs enormously. Yeah. And it's also, you have a certain amount of privilege to be able to live that way because you don't have dependents, whereas there are a lot of people who I think, sort of, and it always blows my mind as someone who doesn't have children, the level of kind of insouciance with which people will often have children financially and not really, I think, measure, because you can maybe cobble it together and be struggling constantly and be sort of figuring things out as you go. But if you're the child who's in that environment, it's very hard on them.
There are a lot of people who are supporting extended family members. Yes. There are a lot of decisions, had my priority been retirement savings, that I would have made differently.
For sure. But yeah, I'm not going to dual income splain you on the possibility of that. I totally agree with what you're saying.
And I think of the people, I'm trying to think of the single women in my life I know who are homeowners without someone giving them a down payment.
Shout out Stephanie.
Yeah.
Very proud of you. And she works in media, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's another thing where I'm regret. If I'd taken, listen, the media, this is, there's no solution to the problem of being in the media right now, but I think it's a problem that is extending itself to a lot of other fields, that the instability of media is now something many fields and careers are beginning to experience with all the changes that are going on in very frightening ways. But yeah, no, I don't have stress about not having retirement savings.
Slay.
Sorry for the comment section. If you want to have stress for me, please feel free.
They get triggered by, I think, I love you guys, but you guys do get triggered by anything that you feel like you want to be like, no, you have to blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You guys are, if you're watching this channel, it's because you're the kind of person who, and a lot of the women who watch this channel come from financial insecurity and instability.
Oh, I'm sure.
So they're obsessed with having a sense of control over it.
To be clear, I have many friends in my life. They don't live in this country. They live in a country where they have social benefits and the cost of living is
lower.
The cost of ownership is lower. You know, I would only have to have a $20,000 down payment to own an apartment in Paris. I would have $250,000 down payment to own an apartment in New York. Like this, that's what I mean when I say it's so far out of reach. I can have I could own if that was all I had to put together for home ownership. But my studio that I live in, it would be $850,000 if it went on the market, and the 20% down payment for that is not 250. I can't add, but close. But they are also people who are driven by financial anxiety, and they've made very different decisions along the way because that is a driving force for them. Clearly not a driving force for me. Like clearly not like the number one decision I make every day is not how do I solve this financial stress in my life. Currently it's definitely top of mind, but that has not been a driving force in my life. And I think that is reflective of an upbringing and prioritizing that is maybe not the most practical. It was practical for me, but when that is your driving force, making the decisions, making the 9-to-5 job or the where you live that allows you to achieve financial security becomes the thing that brings you comfort. It becomes the thing that is satisfying. And I totally recognize that. Like I 100% recognize that if you're driven by financial security, your corporate job is allowing you a sense of freedom and agency because it's solving that anxiety for you. My anxiety was having a corporate job, you know, so totally. I'm making different decisions based on the thing that causes me the most stress. And here we are.
I want to talk about sex because it's a pretty big through line in your most recent book.
Depending on who you talk to. The early readers were like, oh my God, there's so much sex. And then people heard that in the second round were like, oh my God, there's hardly any sex in here. What were you talking about?
I don't know. I think people are just like, if women are talking about sex in any way that isn't like extremely performative and like, you know, sort of catered to being sexually appealing to young men, I guess, it's very taboo. We don't like talking or thinking about it. Which, by the way, you mentioned Baby Girl. I must say, I saw that in France, actually. And when I tell you it was standing room only, the ushers had to come in and be like, everyone has to sit in a chair with people they don't know. This is over. Like, this is sold out.
So
the French were seated for Baby Girl.
Did you like it?
I loved it.
Yeah, I hated it so much.
So many of my friends hated it, and they were like, what a missed opportunity. What a this, what a that. I was just there with my popcorn watching her put frozen peas on Antonio Banderas' face. I loved it.
I thought it was so patronizing and condescending. But I'm always interested because I think that from being a memoirist, I know that people's responses to my book has very little to do with me and everything to do with what's happening in their life. And so because to me, I was like, oh my God, this is like, anyway, so go on.
No. I also, for me, Nicole Kidman, everything she does now is in the sci-fi genre because she looks so ridiculous.
It's so, yeah.
Like the iPhone face is like, we're so far beyond, like her in The Northman is hilarious. But like, specifically in Baby Girl, the fact that they had to like put fake bruises on her face to make her look as if she's gone to get Botox when like, that face hasn't moved in 25 years.
I know, so I thought, how radical would that movie have been if they'd cast Olivia Colman in it, and how much more interesting. And also it really frustrated me, the idea that, I mean, she looked like a 15-year-old girl and she was behaving like a 15-year-old girl, and both of those things frustrated me because as someone who frequently interacts with younger men, the appeal is your agency and your power. That is the attraction, not your sort of infantilization and not the childlike nature of your body. And I even thought it would have been so much better with Gwyneth in it, because Gwyneth, the Nicole character was like, ashamed that she wanted to be told what to do. And I think there's so much agency at that age. If you're like, I know the thing that's going to satisfy me sexually is to be tied up or spanked or told what to do. That choice is so powerful. And like, owning that choice is part of being this age. And I was like, you don't think you could just very easily see Gwyneth marching into like the Goop office or whatever and just being like, today I want to crawl and be spanked. You 25-year-old are the one that's going to do it. Like it felt insulting to me on so many levels, not just a missed opportunity, but I was like, you're missing the point of all of what's happening out there, and that you're determined to, she's 50 in on page only. She looks like she's 25. She's behaving like she's 15. Like, can we actually have a grown woman in all areas of her life in this role? Because that's when it becomes really interesting.
I agree with everything you're saying.
Right.
And yet I was just sitting there with my gummy bears like, this is great. If you guys want to watch a movie about or an older woman having an affair with a younger man where it is actually true to life and she actually looks her age and there's real stakes, watch Bright Days Ahead, I think is the English title. It's a French movie. Fanny Ardant. It came out like 10 years ago.
Ooh.
She has an affair with a man who teaches computer like tech stuff at her retirement home, or like an old folks activity home, whatever, that she gets put in after retirement, and she's going through a midlife crisis or later in life crisis. It's a very torrid affair. It's excellent. One of my top 5 favorite movies, top 10. But
what's your number 1 favorite movie?
Moonstruck.
Love it.
And
I just
you?
watched it the other day. What is my favorite movie? I mean, Katharine Hepburn, The Philadelphia Story, though the older I get, I prefer Adam's Rib, actually. I love that they're already married. Oh, it's Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn, and it's their...
Noted.
Oh, it's so, so good. But An Unmarried Woman is, I think, my favorite. It's impossible to get on streaming. It is an extraordinary movie, and it doesn't end with marriage, and it doesn't end with having a baby. And it's Jill Clayburgh. It's 1979 New York, and it's just perfection.
Love it. But yes, so you're making nothing but points about Baby Girl, but what can I say? But so you talk about sex pretty candidly, and I've always kind of said if you're a woman who doesn't want kids, you get to live like a man, and I think that's probably doubly true if you're not partnered. Can you talk about the way that you view sex and relationships and dating now as opposed to when you were, let's say, in your early to mid 30s?
Romantic relationships? I just separate that because I'm always like, I have such a long-term relationships. I have such a long-term friendships. Most of my friendships at this point are at least 20 years. So when we talk about long-term relationships, I'm always like, let's not just limit that to romantic relationships. How do I think about it now? I think about it as something that is available to me when I want it, how I want it, and not necessary to fulfilling life. Something I can take if the need strikes, and something that I can leave if I have other things going on.
You're not catching feelings?
Sometimes, but I find at this age, I'm providing a lot of the emotional support for many people in long-term romantic relationships. I want to not sound cynical about this because I don't actually think it's useful to be cynical. I find when I'm dating men my own age, many of them are, well, in New York, they're all in open marriages. Not all, but many of them are like...
All your friends are in open marriages?
No. All the people I encounter on dating apps in New York are in so-called, not all of them, but many of them are like, I'm in an open marriage. And I'm like, are both of you aware you're in an open marriage? And I think open marriages in New York, not to make this whole podcast about New York, but are often a real estate marriage. Like, it often has to do with real estate because no one can afford to live in separate...
Marriage.
Pardon?
Or a lavender marriage.
What does that mean?
When one partner is not sexually attracted to the other?
I still think it's about real estate. I still think that people can't afford to that's why Bill de Blasio moved to the basement, right? They couldn't afford to have 2 separate homes, especially when there are kids involved. So people are like, we're just going to open up our marriage. Whatever. I'm always like, do both of you know you're in an open marriage? And are both of you fine with that? And actually, I don't want to take on this because it's not very interesting to me. But I do find dating men my own age, there's a lot of, I always think it's so funny when people are like, men are inundated with all of these options to get married again, and a woman in your 50s, you don't have any. I'm like, it's the exact opposite. I could be married by Saturday if I wanted to. That men come out of divorce at this age and they don't know how to be alone. They don't know how to take care of themselves, and they're like this. And I am like, demonstrate to me that you deserve a place in my very full life, like that I want to make space for this. There's a lot of neediness, and there's some element of anger that I encounter. And then when you date people in their 30s, which is fun and has a lot of energy, I think sometimes the emotional maturity is not on par with you. So I don't think I don't actually think I'm out there. The idea is, I'm not saying I don't believe in romance, but I often think when I think of the times in my life when I was like, oh, you fell in love, or it was so romantic, that it actually was, our understanding of romance is like an unhealthy obsession sometimes. Like it actually like love bombing gets overused, but I look back on it and I think the things that swept me off my feet at age 30, I just see as red flags now from like such a distance, that it has very little appeal to me.
Are you open to long-term partnership?
Sure, maybe. Yes. I mean, I'm open to whatever. I don't walk around being like, I'm not open to this. But a lot of it is that I have such a wonderful life that catching my attention for any extended period of time in a way that would make me feel like I'm making space for you is maybe not the easiest thing. And I actually think that is not uncommon. In women I know, there's this.
It's been the universal answer from the women we've had on the show.
Yeah, it's this sense of like, what is that French guy on TikTok who goes so viral? It's like, you think she's not calling you back? She's poured herself a bath. She has the bed to herself. She has this. And I'm like, there's a lot of truth to this. There's a lot of truth to, do I want, like, you want to go on a trip with me? I don't, like, earn your place here. Demonstrate to me that I need to make space for you, because I don't feel like there's a hole that needs to be filled, I guess is the answer to this question. I don't look at my life and think there's a hole that needs to be filled that I'm searching for. It's more like, are you something or an experience that I want to make space for? And that's increasingly rare, I think. I don't know if I met somebody that I really wanted to spend time with. Absolutely. I meet people all the time I want to spend time with. A lot of them are women friends. I make space for women all the time.
What's something about aging that we don't talk about enough?
How great it is.
Hell yeah.
I mean, I love it. Listen, I might not say that, but at every step of the way, I'm like, wow, this is great. Even though my eyesight, I got past 40, which is the age everyone tells you things will start aging, and I sailed through my 40s without a lot of age-related issues. And then I hit 50, and within 6 months, I was like, oh, now you need glasses to get out of bed. But still, it's great. I'm a very big proponent of aging.
Well, the alternative is death, so,
right.
Again,
just to tie back, though, I'm still thinking about, like, retirement savings. I write this in Enjoy, and I recognize about this by myself, because when I'm in a crunch period, I'm like, I have a very high tolerance for risk. And one of the reasons I'm able to have that tolerance for risk is because my health has been, I've been very fortunate to have good health to this age. I hope it continues. But if it doesn't, that allows a high tolerance for risk, because particularly in this country, health is wealth. And that there's a lot of decisions I would have had to make differently if I was thinking not just for financial security, but for health security. And so that high tolerance for risk that I operate with, which has afforded me a very big life, is also very rooted in the fact that I've, only have to go to the doctor once a year so far. Anyway, speaking of, I enjoy aging. I enjoy aging because my health has not given me reason to not enjoy it so far.
True that. Are you lifting weights?
Yeah.
You gotta lift those weights. Okay, what is something that you enjoy about aging that you didn't expect to? Sounds like everything.
I don't think I expected to be so attractive increasing, even more attractive to men, not just men, even more attractive, period, at this age than I was at any other age. That I just get, that I recognize that people find me more attractive, whether it be sexually or friendship or whatever it is, that I am increasingly powerful. And I was surprised because no one ever prepares you for that.
And many women, I think, don't get to experience it.
Yeah.
Although we've had many women now be like, if you were like an ultra baddie in your 20s, aging is going to hit you like a punch in the face. But if you were never someone who was like really, really prized for your physical appearance, then actually you'll find that aging in many ways
I think when you,
experience.
That's when I was reading All Fours and I thought, oh, Miranda July was somebody who was really rewarded for beauty.
Did you like that book?
I appreciated how original it was.
That's one way to put it. What is the most important thing you've learned about money in the past few decades?
I don't have enough of it. What have I learned about money? I've learned that a lot of people's money is not the result of their hard work, I think.
People, it's so funny. Like, I'm so transparent about my money, and sometimes like people will really nitpick my stuff because I put it out there, in which like I made that deal with the devil, like whatever. Right. But I so have such a temptation sometimes to be like, do you know how many other like motherfuckers are lying to you on this app every goddamn day about their money, and you have no idea how
Get into the wedding section and Street Easy ownership records, and then that's like between the two you learn a lot.
You surely do. Okay, what's the most important thing you've learned about relationships in the past few decades? And I'm going to say I want to hear specifically about romantic and platonic separately.
Friendships take as much work as we credit marriages for requiring. That a friendship is, long-term friendships don't just happen. They're not passive. They're a choice that you invest in and take just as seriously as literally any other investment, be it financial, emotional, or relationship. That they're not an accident.
And romantic?
I don't that they're not necessary to self-worth or fulfillment in the way that I was conditioned to think of them in my 20s.
I must say, on the marriage requiring work front, I have a golden rule, which is that if you don't have kids and you have enough money and you say marriage takes a lot of work, get divorced. Because what in the world are you having to work on?
Right.
Like, if with all of those advantages, you are still at each other's necks.
Yeah. I think, too, when I hear a lot from what's interesting, but I'm mostly here to enjoy myself, is I actually hear most about the friendships. Is that I get a lot of mail being like, I'm so envious of your friendships, or how do you have friendships like this? And I think, particularly for women in their 30s who are experiencing sort of their friends going off, getting married and having young kids, and this sense of how do I maintain a friendship with a friend who has small children and doesn't have time for me? And I'm like, you're going to have to put more into it for these years. Like, that's just the reality of it. There's no equality here, that people who have small children don't have time, and you're gonna have to decide whether I think making a deeper bench of friends becomes necessary at that point, but you're gonna have to say, is this person important enough to me that I'm riding the next few years out with them, recognizing that they can't give as much as I can, knowing that on the flip side that'll change.
If you'd like to learn more about building platonic relationships and community in your own life, read Having People Over, out everywhere, 10/21. What advice would you give to a 30-something woman who is currently single, no kids, and not where she wants to be financially?
Get a financial advisor. Don't be ashamed of your money or lack thereof. I once had an accountant where I went in and I owed $3,000 in taxes, and I was making $28,000 a year, and that felt like I could have owed $10 million in taxes. Like, it was the equivalent to me. I was really upset. And I'm not a crier, but I remember I think I might have started crying, and he just said, I know this seems overwhelming, but money problems are the best problems to have because they're fixable, and many of life's problems don't have a solution when we talk about health and risk, etc. and I've kept that in my head, there is a solution. It might not be an easy solution. It might not be a quick solution, but the more you ignore it, the worse it's going to get. Remove all shame from it and just get a financial advisor and keep your eye on real estate listings.
We didn't pay her to say that. Our sponsor for this show is a financial advisor. So.
No, I mean, that's something that I learned the hard way, right? It's not that someone ever said that to me. I sort of is clearly hammered through myself. But yeah, I think the shame that gets attached to it. I know people who, I actually find that when I'm very stressed out about something or worried, going through my bank account and understanding exactly what's there brings me enormous comfort. Even if what's there is like $5, it's still, knowing what's there is useful.
Yeah, that was all generated by AI, and I forced her to say that. No, but it's true.
I don't use AI. I've never used it.
Well, there you go.
No.
But that's, I think anyone over the age of like 30, 35 has a very complicated relationship with AI. Yeah. And young people are like, what are you talking about? I don't even think anymore.
I know, my 14-year-old niece told me the other day, she was like, the kid in my class who uses AI, I mean, that's not serving you. I think there's the middle ground of like early 20s, but the teenagers sometimes I think are way smarter. Like they are.
Let's hope so.
Let's hope, yeah.
Glennice, thank you so much for joining us.
Really? No more fire crime? Like, what else we got? What else? What other terrible...
I wish.
Sorry, comment section. If you want to solve my retirement funds, I'll start a GoFundMe.
Everyone start going off in the comments. Yeah. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you again so much. And where can people find your work?
My Instagram is No One Tells You This, and I'm mostly here to enjoy myself, and No One Tells You This. The books are available in all booksellers as far as I know.
Thank you. And thank you all. I'll see you back next week on Just Getting Good.